All right, let me take a break, and when we come back, I have an opportunity to speak to someone all the way from Israel. So you don't want to miss this. It's going to be extremely interesting. Poor Benjamin Netanyahu. This is an outrage. Reminds me of what's happened to Donald Trump. I'll be right back. All right, and welcome back. I got a very interesting email from a person who I have a great deal of respect for and has been a guest on this show. And she had, sent me some information about this group. It's called Project 315 in Israel. So I invited Moshik Kovarsky on the show today. This is a man who, along with, I think, 3 other citizens in Israel, has decided to push back against what they understand to be a coup against Bibi Netanyahu. How are you today, sir?
Hi, Joyce. Thanks for having me on.
No, it's a privilege to speak with somebody who won't just sit back and allow wrong things to go on in the country they love. Now, your background is technology, correct?
Correct. I'm a fifth-generation Israeli. I've been in the high-tech industry since my grown-up years. And yes, I completed a couple of exits, won a couple of prizes, but now working full-time voluntarily to unleash this movement against what we feel is the unfair indictments against Netanyahu that actually brought about the coup by legal and media means.
Mm-hmm. Now, this is not something, you were not always involved in politics, particularly in right-leaning politics, were you?
Well, on and off. In the 90s, I was at one point swayed to vote to the competitor of Netanyahu because of the media blitz and the media brainwash. Mm-hmm. But since 2000, I've been heavily on the right, the 2000, the second Intifada, and what happened in Israel. So I was a Sharon supporter. And then when Netanyahu came to power in 2009, I was with Netanyahu all the way until he was deposed about 9 months ago.
Mm-hmm. Now, there's a lot of comparisons that I could make. I'm a big Donald Trump supporter, and my feeling is that between the media and elite political class in this country, a lot of evil things took place that resulted in him either losing the election or appearing to lose the election. I mean, that's still up for grabs, in my opinion. Netanyahu, the same thing happened.
Exactly, and the resemblance is really eerie. Mm-hmm. You can see it with the way the media treated Netanyahu and the same way the media treated Donald Trump. You can see it by the actual law establishment ganging up against him. And the people, Netanyahu today, just like Trump, is the most popular leader in Israel still by every public opinion poll. But they managed to concoct a coalition of parties that don't see eye-to-eye ideology at all. The only item that they all agree is that they hate Netanyahu because he's blocking their way to power. Mm. So, and on top of that, in 2015, Netanyahu won the election hands-on, and we formed a right-wing government. And that's when they realized that despite all the help they got, even from the State Department, they couldn't win the election, so they decided to depose him by legal means. And they started a series of bogus investigations on issues that they were trying to brainwash the public to believe that he is hurting the country. For example, the gas exploration, the submarine deal, the communication infrastructure, and the media. Mm-hmm. And they failed on couple, and they won on couple, bringing him to court. Mm-hmm. But the whole thing, the whole calculation of this establishment was they will threaten him so much that he will retire on his own volition. But that didn't happen because this man is made of steel, again, similar to Donald Trump. Mm-hmm. And he fought on, even though they recruited, now we know, using very dubious techniques like torturing and illegal pressure on people to become state witness, just like they tried to pick up all the people around Trump and put him in danger by people who knew everything about him, but he didn't fold. Same thing with Netanyahu. In 2018, they recruited 3 state witnesses, and he didn't fold. But then came the election of 2019, and they submitted an indictment just 40 days before the elections, hoping they'll sway the public. And they leaked all kinds of illegal information during this campaign time, hoping that the public will decide to vote for the competition. And the result was a tie, despite all this. If they didn't do all these illegal techniques, for sure we would have a right-wing government back then. And then we went through 2 years of turmoil, election after election. It was tie after tie. And the only way that they managed to depose him in June of 2021 was by actually some people defecting our rhino side, write in name only, and go to the other side. And that's how come he is not the prime minister right now.
And I think part of it, and I'm sure you would see the truth in this, the idea that this was the only man who could have dismantled the Oslo Accords, which, in my opinion, were devastating to the future of Israel.
Correct.
And so along with Donald Trump, they put the Abraham Accords in effect. And, of course, that was the beginning of the end for the Oslo Accords. And I think there were a lot of power players all over the Middle East and here in the United States who didn't want that to happen.
Yes, and I firmly believe that if Donald Trump would continue to be president on a second term, and if Netanyahu stayed, we would by now have many more peace accords, maybe even with Saudi Arabia. It was very close to be signed, but then everything fell apart once the Biden administration took over and once in Israel the government changed. But if you'd like, I can tell you a little bit about the 315 project, what we did.
Please do.
So the trial opened a year ago after many pre-trial discussions in which the defense exposed a lot of illegal techniques that were used, but the judges said, let's go on and judge about it later. For example, in Israel, there's a law that you cannot investigate about a prime minister unless there is a specific attorney general approval for doing that. And apparently, it all started without this approval. And this is a very big no-no. You can say it's like a FISA court in the States. So they did it anyway, and the judges saw it, but they said, we'll decide about that later. So the trial started, and when the trial started, a friend of mine, his name is Guy Levy, approached me and asked me, he said, look, they submitted an appendix to the indictment because the court told them they have to do that, in which they had to delineate the cases in which Netanyahu received a bribe. And what is the bribe, you would ask? The bribe, according to the indictment, is that he got some exceptional coverage in some marginal website. I mean, it's like a world precedent that you have coverage in a media site, in an internet site, to become a bribe gift.
Wow.
So that they had to delineate the cases, and they listed 315 such cases. They did it in a rush. And this guy, my friend Guy Levy, came to me and said, I checked one of the cases, and it was bogus. I mean, this was not an exceptional thing. This was something they sent to all the papers. It wasn't unusual at all. So let's check all 315. So we got a group together. We got about 100 volunteers. We divided the work. We collected all the info. We tabulated it. We put a website on. We went to and that was something they didn't expect, and the public really loved it, that somebody is giving the prosecution, which used to have their way, a fair fight, and actually exposing how the indictment is really false.
What was the motive, do you think, behind some of these attacks? I mean, we know with Donald Trump, he was trying to dismantle the elitist corporate leaders who had been running the country behind the scenes, who were not elected. So there were a lot of powerful people that he was coming up against. Is it similar, what was happening to Bibi Netanyahu?
Yes, it's always the fight about power. In Israel, unfortunately, over the years, there was a process of, it was even defined as, by some legal scholars as piracy. Like the legal branch of the government basically took more and more authorities from the executive branch, and they don't have any honest critique, somebody that will look over what they do. And when Netanyahu was considering some reforms that will allow the right to rebalance between the three branches of government, that was a direct threat on their authority and their power. So I think that's one thing that caused them to go after him. And the second thing is the media. He was very gung-ho on opening the media to competition. In Israel, there are some strange laws that developed historically that if you just want to open a TV channel and advertise, you cannot do it without getting a franchise from the government. And when you wanted to open that was a direct threat to the duopoly that is now holding the power on the media. So all these studies are there to get him for trying to do that.
And he couldn't say anything. They could say whatever they wanted, but he was muzzled. He couldn't even defend himself against the attacks.
Because once they started the investigation, any type of any way in which he tried to defend himself and say that the accusations are not true, they interpret it as he is fighting the legal system and destroying it, according to them. But lately, just the development of the last few days in Israel is we have our own, they call it the Israeli watergate. They found out that part of the evidence achieved in his trial and others are done by total illegal cyber attacks on people's mobile phones and basically sucking all the information. That was done without authorization by police going rampant together with the legal establishment. And that is now ongoing. Maybe next week we'll have more news about it. They stopped the trial in the meantime. The prosecution have to come out with a full report. Which of the witnesses in Netanyahu's trial were basically abused this way, and the information about them used to extort them. So we hope to see next week how it will unfold.
Well, I'm going to want to check.
Big scandal in Israel right now.
Yeah, I'm going to want to check back with you to see how that unfolds, if you wouldn't mind, because I think when I listen and when I've read the things that came out of the Project 315, the comparison to what happened to Donald Trump is so deep and so profound, and I'm trying to fight the same fight over here that you're fighting over there. And it looks like you guys have done a lot of the work. Maybe I don't have to reinvent the wheel, and I can model it after what you have done. Just tracking and revealing all of the nonsense that went on during multiple, investigations against President Trump, most of which ended up with the results, obvious that he had not done anything, that these things were not even worthy of the public's time, but the media is still running with them. They're still talking about Russian collusion. So I feel your pain. I also feel pretty good about knowing that there is a method to unearthing some of this information. And I hope we can talk again, Moshik. I really do appreciate your time today.
I appreciate your time. You're inviting me, and I'll be always happy to come back if you'd like me.
And where can people, find out more? Is there a website they can go to?
Yeah, you can Google Project 315. If you're a Hebrew speaker, there's a whole lot of information. If you're an English speaker, you can just go to the couple of pages that we put on to describe it. We're going to expand it also, the English section.
All right, good, because I'm going to be using it as a blueprint. Thank you so much. Appreciate talking with you. Have a great day, evening. I don't know what time of day it is there with you.
It's almost 8 in the evening.
Okay, good night then. Take care.
Bye-bye.
All right. Let's take a break, and then when we come back, I will wrap this up. You see, we're not the only democracy that's been attacked within. And You know, nobody asked the question how much I have admired Bibi Netanyahu all these years, but I watched all of the things that happened, all these indictments, the media against him, indictments over a submarine that the government approved purchasing. He never got indicted off that, and yet the attacks kept coming. The natural gas explorations, when, you know, with the help of the energy minister at that time, he made sure that the natural gas was secured. And with the price of gas sky high now, people in Israel don't understand how much they owe him for sheltering Israel from the hikes that are going on in the world right now. But the same thing all happened here. So we need to pay attention, and we need to see how people go about exposing the shenanigans, as he referred to them. All right, let me take a break. Don't forget that Dan Bundy